The term death march has a particular meaning in the software industry, primarily in the gaming industry. It means working obscenely long hours trying to get a project to, quote, code complete. Now, this is sometimes also known as crunch time. I want to tell you the story of one person that rocked the gaming programming industry for the better. Or was it for the better? This is the story of EA Spouse. It's been 15 years since EA Spouse made that pivotal post on the blog on LiveJournal. It was November 10th, 2004, when she posted on LiveJournal. It was called EA, the Human Story. Later on, it was revealed that her name was Erin Hoffman. I'll put links in the description to the full article so you can read the entire story. Let me read you some selected quotes. Electronics Arts offered a job. The salary was right and the benefits were good, so my significant other took it. I remember that they asked him in one of the interviews, "How do you feel about working long hours?" It's just part of the game industry. A few studios can avoid crunch time as deadlines loom, so we thought nothing of it. Within weeks, production had accelerated into a mild crunch. 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. Not bad. Months remained until any real crunch would start, and the team was told that this pre-crunch was to prevent a big crunch towards the end. The producers even set a deadline. They gave a specific date for the end of the crunch, which was still months away from the title shipping date. So it seemed safe. That date came and went, and went, and went. When the next news came that it was not about a reprieve, it was another acceleration. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Now you gotta love this quote. Now it seems the real crunch, the one that the producers of the title so wisely prepared their team for by running them into the ground ahead of time. The current mandatory hours are 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week, with the occasional Saturday evening off for good behavior at 6:30 p.m. Wow. And the kicker, for the honor of this treatment, EA salaried employees receive A. No overtime, B. No compensation time. Comp time is the equalization of time off for overtime. Any hours spent during crunch time accrue into days off after the production is shipped. And C. No additional sick or vacation leave. The time just goes away. EA's attitude towards this, which is actually a part of company policy, it now appears, has been, in an anonymous quotation, that I've heard repeated by multiple managers, if they don't like it, they can work someplace else. And the last quote I want to read to you from this article is, in the first weekend, Madden 2005 grossed $65 million. EA's annual revenue is approximately $2.5 billion. This company is not strapped for cash. Their labor practices are inexcusable. Now, I've just read you some selected quotes from EA, the Human Story, and I'll just scroll through here kind of slowly so you get an idea about the length of this post. This post resulted in thousands and thousands of responses. It really struck a nerve with all kinds of people working in the gaming industry and their significant others. Let's move on and define a few terms. So I've jumped over to Wikipedia and looked up the definition to death march. In project management, a death march is a project that the participants feel is destined to fail, or that requires a stretch of unsustainable overwork. The general feel of the project reflects that of an actual death march because project members are forced by their superiors to continue the project against the members' better judgment. I'll skip down a little bit and read this quote. Often, the death march will involve desperate attempts to right the course of a project by asking team members to work especially grueling hours, 14-hour days, 7 days a week, etc. There's even been a book written on this by Edward Jordan. You can find it on Amazon. It's in the second edition. It's called Death March. Although I like the cover art better for the first edition, which I'll put up on the screen over here. So I want to take a few minutes and tell you about my only story that ever came close to approaching a death march. And I would just call it crunch time. When I was a programmer for BMC software, I was on a project. I won't name the project, I won't name the people involved, but there were some issues, I think. First issue we had was we had two team leaders, so they both felt that they had to write a lot of code, and we didn't really end up with one true leader of our project. That's my opinion. And I still remember that their boss called us all into a meeting one day. I had no idea why. And we went in there and they started throwing out items that had to be done for the project. Port this software to HP Unix, port this software to Windows, do this part of the project, do that part of the project. And each part was thrown out to us. And the procedure was we had to think to ourselves how long it was going to take to write that part of the project without saying anything out loud. We'd all think for 15 or 20 or 30 seconds, and then we'd say it out loud. Oh, I think that's going to take 2 weeks. No, that's going to take 4 weeks. And we would banter back and forth, do a little bit of argument, and a number would be reached. Okay, that's going to take 2 weeks. And my boss's boss would then write that down. And we'd go on to the next item. And we'd go back and forth. Well, that's 6 weeks. That could be some trouble. No, 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 it's not going to be any trouble. That'll take 2 weeks. And then we'd go on. Well, porting it to this operating system, that's going to be easy. That's only going to take a week. And we'd go back and forth and we'd write all these things down. And he kept writing all these things down. And the meeting went on for like 3 hours. And I didn't think anything of it except, I really wish I could have that 3 hours back. Well, about a week later, a Microsoft project PERT diagram shows up with all those numbers we had thrown out. Now, you got to realize these estimates we were making were wet finger in the wind estimations. They were estimations on how long it was going to take to do a task that had not been designed, had not been scoped, and we really didn't understand how much was involved. But now, my boss's boss had put that in a really official looking document, and we were on the hook. That meant that if we said it was going to take 3 weeks to do a certain task, it didn't matter if that was 3 weeks of 40-hour work, or 60-hour work, or 80 hours of work. Now, our two leads, they had operated this way in their professional career the entire time. They had never really had a full design to go by to know how long it was going to take to do something. So sure enough, after about 8 months in the project, we went into crunch time and we started working 7 days a week. And this was probably 10 to 12 hours a day, but you might only work 6 hours a day on Sunday. But you had to show up because politically, if you didn't show up, it would look bad. Now, after a few weeks, you'd get there in the morning and you just couldn't concentrate. You'd spend a long time looking at your email. You'd spend a long time getting ready to go. You'd go and get some coffee. You'd go and get a snack. And your productivity was just lousy. I'm convinced that after about 3 weeks of 60 plus hours a week working, we were less productive than if we had just worked our normal schedule. But we had to push through to code complete. Well, to end a long story, we were getting close to code complete and we got called into a meeting and our boss's boss announced that the project was canceled. Now, we had 12 programmers on that project, 2 quality assurance people, a doc writer, and 2 managers. And we were all getting paid big bucks. So BMC Software threw over $1 million away by canceling that project. And let me tell you, in my opinion, they made the right decision because that project was not going to have the functionality that companies wanted to buy. So, if you don't design something, you can't plan how long it's going to take to complete it. And this is a huge problem in the software industry. Now, getting back to our story, this prompted when EA Spouse did the post on LiveJournal, this prompted or exposed a few other tell all stories by other people that worked for game studios. And eventually, this led to a lawsuit. So by 2005, the middle of 2005, remember this started in 2004, employees were readying a class action lawsuit against Electronic Arts. And I'll post this article in the description and you can read through it, but this was the first article really going against these types of practices these big game companies were doing. So the lawsuit was posted and it worked its way through the courts and there was a settlement. Software engineers have won a $14.9 million settlement from Electronic Arts in a settlement of a California class action lawsuit over unpaid overtime, following a similar $15.6 million settlement reached in October with graphics artists. So now we're thinking, great, there's going to be change in the gaming industry. There was a class action lawsuit about these behaviors by companies that are making money hands over fist. Everything's going to be wonderful moving forward because companies will not dare to do these behaviors in the future. So 15 years ago, in about a 2-year process, we went from EA Spouse posting on a blog, leading to a class action lawsuit, leading to a settlement, and promises to do better. So at this point, I'd like to say everything was fixed. Everybody lived happily ever after, and the evil managers no longer did their bad behavior. Or did they? But first, let's talk about the economics of crunch mode. Stanford University has a series of articles called Crunch Mode, Programming to the Extreme, and on this page, the economics of crunch mode, I want to read you a quote down here. Ernest Abbey, the head of one of the greatest German factories, wrote many years ago that the shortening from 9 to 8 hours, that is, a cutting down of more than 10%, did not involve a reduction in the day's product, but an increase, and that this increase did not result from any supplementary effort by which the intensity of the work would be reinforced in an unhygienic way, in other words, safety. This conviction of Abbey still seems to hold true after millions of experiments over the whole globe. Now, he did these studies in 1913, so it's been known for 100 years that working too much leads to lower productivity. You're tired, you make more mistakes, and it takes more time to correct the mistakes than it took you to do the work with the extra work because you're so tired you can't think straight and you don't work as fast. This is a well-known fact. This is not just for industry. This has been proven again and again and again, and it was proven 100 years ago. So why do these managers at these software companies, these gaming software companies, do this? Because they don't have an education, because they don't understand, because they think it's like making widgets. If you make more widgets per hour, you'll have more completed. What about the defects? It's been proven over and over again that crunch time or death marches are counterproductive. So why they do them? Well, that's how I did it when I was a young programmer. Well, I did a lot of stupid things when I was young. That doesn't make it right. Once again, not trying to hammer this home, but on this page of the Stanford website, the relationship between hours worked and productivity, let me read you this quote. This dramatic decrease in average productivity can be explained in two primary ways. First, it may be the case that employees simply become much less efficient due to stress, fatigue, and other factors. Their maximum efficiency during any given workday may become substantially less than what it was during the normal working hours. Thus, overworked employees may simply be substantially less productive at all hours of the working day, enough so that their average productivity decreases to the extent the additional hours that they are working provide no benefit. This has been proven again and again and again. So, with studies proving this, and the abuses being brought to light and successful lawsuits against the gaming industry, there was all kinds of change. Everything was wonderful, and it stopped. Except it didn't. Here's an article from May 9th, 2019, titled Grueling: 100-Hour Work Weeks and Crunch Culture Are Pushing the Video Game Industry to a Breaking Point. Here's what's going on. Jumping along in the article, it mentions the EA spouse letter and the lawsuit, but says nearly 15 years later, little has changed. The same types of reports are regularly surfacing from major video game development studios. Companies like Epic Games, does Fortnite, Rockstar Games, Red Dead Redemption 2, and yes, Electronic Arts. So, you can see that this bad behavior, this inefficiency, treating your people like dirt because you know they're replaceable, is continuing in the gaming industry. So Rockstar Games had a similar spouse letter published in 2010, similar to EA spouse, and this resulted in Rockstar quietly settling a multi-million-dollar lawsuit with former employees. So Rockstar's done it. It happened at Telltale Studios, major crunch time. Then they just got laid off. The team that worked on Fortnite, but the massive success of Fortnite came at a cost. I work an average of 70 hours a week, one person told Polygon. There's probably at least 50 or even 100 other people working at Epic working these kind of hours. I know people who pull 100-hour weeks. Red Dead Redemption 2 at Rockstar Games, we were working 100-hour weeks. Well, you can read the article. So it goes on. This has not changed. So just be aware that if you're going to work for a game studio, the supply of programmers who want to work at a game studio far outweighs the demand. So you're going to get paid less, you're going to work long hours, and you're most likely going to burn out, quit, get a regular programming job, make more money, and work less. And it's not just the work hours that are a problem. This article recently came up just a week ago on about Ubisoft and talking about sweeping allegations of sexual harassment and assault. So this was a culture, and human resources reportedly didn't want to do things about it. Now, the head of Ubisoft here, Creative Force, resigned in the wake of these allegations. I'll let you read this article over at Ars Technica. So what would I say are the conclusions of all of this? Well, working at the gaming industry is not going to change, at least not significantly. I think that the Fair Labor Standard Act needs revision because a exempt employee is one who does not get paid overtime. So what is an exempt employee? Well, I just did a Google. An exempt employee is a term that refers to a category of employees set out in the Fair Labor Standard Act Exempt employees do not receive overtime pay, nor do they qualify for the minimum wage. When an employee is exempt, it primarily means they are exempt from receiving overtime pay. Exempt employees stand in contrast to non exempt employees. So, the gaming industry is taking advantage of these salaried exempt employees and working them to the point that they burn out, and then there's three people waiting to replace them. So once you're done doing your glory job of being a game programmer, just go get a regular job, work some regular hours, and make 20 or 25% more money. That's my recommendation to you. Or do an indie game on the side. So that's it from the Geek. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe.